In 1945, American intelligence officers raced through collapsed Germany hunting scientists, not criminals. Over 1,600 Nazi researchers would be recruited, their SS files quietly replaced. We will follow Wernher von Braun, SS officer, rocket designer, future director of NASA. He had personally visited Buchenwald to select prisoners for his underground slave labor factory. 20,000 prisoners died building his rocket, more than the weapon itself ever killed. We will ask who decided those deaths were tradable for rocket science, and why. Germany has surrendered, and you are supposed to be arrested right now. You designed the rocket that killed 9,000 civilians in England and Belgium. 30,000 prisoners built it under your supervision in an underground tunnel system. More died building your weapon than were ever killed by it flying. American officers know your file, every SS rank, every camp visit. They are not coming to arrest you. They need your knowledge too badly. The man was Wernher von Braun, and he was 33 years old in 1945. He had joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and the feared SS in 1940. His specialty was ballistic missiles, specifically the V2, the world's first guided weapon. The V2 traveled 300 miles in 5 minutes, silent until impact. There was no defense against it and no alert system that could save you. V2s killed approximately 9,000 people across England, Belgium, and the Netherlands. They had been built at Mittelwerk, a factory carved inside a mountain in Germany. Mittelwerk was staffed entirely by concentration camp prisoners from the Dora Mittelbau camp. 30,000 men labored there without natural light, often without adequate food or water. More than 20,000 of them died from starvation, beatings, and sheer exhaustion. That casualty count was more than twice the V2's total civilian death toll. When Germany fell in May 1945, American intelligence moved faster than anyone anticipated. The Soviet Union was also hunting Germany's scientists, and this had become a race. Whoever secured the engineers would dominate the next generation of missile and weapons technology. This calculation was made at the highest levels of American military intelligence. It would override laws, presidential orders, and the objections of the State Department. On May 2, 1945, von Braun surrendered to American soldiers in the Austrian Alps. His arm was in a cast from a car crash the previous month. He walked toward the American checkpoint and, by all accounts, was grinning. Within weeks, the JIOA had flagged von Braun as a priority intelligence asset. Truman had issued a clear directive: no Nazis, no war criminals, none at all. The JIOA read the directive and began working around it immediately. Officers went through personnel files and physically removed sections documenting Nazi affiliation. SS membership records, camp affiliations, records of crimes, all of it quietly disappeared. Files were marked with a physical paperclip, a signal that rules no longer applied. The State Department's formal written objections were noted, filed, and overruled. What the JOA was doing was not selective enforcement, it was federal fraud. Nobody in the program was ever disciplined or investigated for this. By late 1945, the first scientists arrived at Fort Bliss, Texas. They were given housing, salaries, and new American biographical profiles that omitted their pasts. Von Braun's new American file described him as a reluctant participant in the Nazi regime. The file omitted his SS rank, his party membership, and his visits to Buchenwald. Those visits are the specific part most accounts still decline to describe directly. In 1943, von Braun traveled to Buchenwald concentration camp on a procurement visit. He was there because Mittelwerk needed technical workers and the supply was running out. He walked among starving prisoners and chose the ones who still looked capable. Records confirm he made multiple such visits over the course of the program. The prisoners he selected were moved underground and put to work building rockets. Very few of them would survive the conditions inside Mittelwerk's tunnels. None of von Braun's selection visits appeared in his new American file. Von Braun was only one of more than 1,600 scientists brought over. Another was Arthur Rudolph, who had been the operations director of Mittelwerk itself. Rudolph had run the facility where 20,000 prisoners worked themselves to death. A post-war American assessment described him as a 100% Nazi. He was recruited anyway, his engineering knowledge deemed more valuable than his past. Rudolph became a senior NASA engineer working on American missile development through the 1950s. He was later named the project director for the Saturn V rocket program. The Saturn V was the rocket that carried Apollo 11 to the moon. Here is what most accounts of Operation Paperclip still leave unasked. The decision to falsify federal records was not the president's decision. Truman had explicitly and in writing said no. No Nazis, no war criminals. The JIOA violated that order and then falsified records to cover the violation. The officers who ordered these falsifications were never investigated by anyone. They were never disciplined, never named in any official inquiry or hearing. The State Department's written objections were filed, noted, and then quietly buried. Not one of the 1,600 scientists brought to America was ever prosecuted. Some received obituaries in major newspapers celebrating their scientific contributions. Dr. Hubertus Strughold was named the father of space medicine. He had participated in medical experiments on living concentration camp prisoners. Dr. Theodore Benzinger invented the ear thermometer still found in every American doctor's office. When Benzinger died, the New York Times ran a warm and admiring obituary. Neither his SS rank nor his role in Nazi medical research appeared in it. Arthur Rudolph lived in San Jose, California, into the 1980s without incident. In 1984, the Justice Department's Office of Special Investigations opened a quiet inquiry. He was confronted privately. No public charge, no formal criminal indictment. He chose to renounce his American citizenship and return to West Germany. No American court tried him for what happened in Mittelwerk's tunnels. No German court pursued him either after he returned to Hamburg. He died in 1996, aged 89, having answered for none of it. 60 to 75 words. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 landed on the surface of the moon. The man who directed the Saturn V program had run Mittelwerk. Most of the world watching that landing did not know this. Most of the journalists reporting on it did not mention it. This is not an argument that the moon landing was wrong. It is a question about what gets left out of a story of triumph. Operation Paperclip did not end with the space race. Its reach was much wider. Aviation medicine, chemical and biological weapons research, psychological testing, all had paperclip scientists. Many of those scientists produced research that genuinely extended and improved human life. That is exactly what makes this impossible to resolve cleanly. The benefits their research produced were real, lasting, and genuinely significant. The crimes that made some of that research possible were also real. The question Operation Paperclip never answered is whether those two things can coexist. Can you celebrate an achievement built on buried crimes? The JIOA answered yes, and then removed the evidence that would allow disagreement. That pattern of choosing an outcome and then managing the record is not new. It recurs anywhere the decision-makers believe the stakes justify the compromise. What Operation Paperclip demonstrates is that this calculation does not close. The hidden records were eventually found by researchers decades later. The admiring obituaries were eventually revised or quietly corrected. What we are left with is the original question, still unanswered after 80 years. Who decided the moon was reachable and the tunnel worth keeping quiet? No one in that chain of command was ever formally asked. Wernher von Braun died on June 16, 1977, in Alexandria, Virginia. He was 65, and he had spent 30 years as an American hero. His New York Times obituary called him a visionary and a pioneer of space. It did not mention his SS rank, his Nazi Party membership, or Buchenwald. His headstone reads, "Devoted husband, father, pioneer of space." The mountain of tunnels was buried long before the rocket ever left the ground. New documentaries every week. Subscribe for more.